his, hers, its. Ordinals, which are first, second, third, next, last, they're certainly determiners. They identify the noun. Quantifying the noun, you have quantifiers, some, any, much, many, few, little. You have numbers, 2, 10, 100, fractions and multipliers, half or twice or 3 times, 4 times. So if adjectives modify nouns, adverbs modify everything else, and we'll come on to adverbs in a second. We'll do verbs first, but I want you just to remember that these are modifiers, but not of nouns. They modify everything else, absolutely everything else. So verbs are actions, and we can have a transitive verb and an intransitive verb. Now be careful, some verbs are both transitive and intransitive, but some verbs are only intransitive. Intransitive means no object. Yeah, it doesn't have an object. You just have a subject and a verb and a full stop, maybe with adverbs or other prepositional phrases or whatever, but you don't need an object. So for example, a verb like break down, as in the phrasal verb break down in a car, or a verb like weep or cry. If you just say he cried, that's fine. You can put a full stop on the end of that and it's a complete thought. It's a full sentence. It's not half a sentence. It's a full sentence. He cried. You could add an adverb. He cried bitterly. He cried slowly. You can add a prepositional phrase. He cried. He cried on the floor, or he cried in his chair, or whatever. But he cried is intransitive. It doesn't need an object, that verb, he cried. You just use it without an object. However, a word like or love, you can't say I like, full stop. It's impossible, because like is a transitive verb. It needs an object. Cry is intransitive. It doesn't have an object. Some verbs, you can use them in both ways, okay? Some verbs you can use them intransitive or transitive. For example, move. You can say he moved, or you can say he moved house. Yeah, he moved house. So it's both transitive and intransitive. You can use it with an object or without an object. But some are just transitive and some are just intransitive, and some are ditransitive. This means they can have two objects. The most obvious example is give. I gave him, yeah, the first object, a book, the second object. So you've got two objects there for one verb. That we would call ditransitive. You can also have auxiliary verbs. Okay, auxiliary verb. Anyone who's taught English to foreign students will know exactly what an auxiliary verb is, because you often have to teach foreign students passive, you have to teach them tenses, future, present, past, and you have to teach them aspects. Simple, continuous, perfect and perfect continuous. In my opinion, there are 4 aspects. There are 3 tenses, which makes 12 types of tenses altogether, because present tense has 4 aspects, past tense has 4 aspects, and future tense has 4 aspects. If you're interested in what they are, they're I play, I am playing, I have played, I have been playing, I played, I was playing, I had played, I had been playing, and I will play, I will be playing, I will have played, and I will have been playing. So there's at least 12 tenses if we include all 4 aspects in English, and in each of those examples you notice auxiliary verbs, which just means that they're verbs which aren't the main verb, but they help to clarify the tense or aspect, or whether they're passive or active. And in the phrase I have been playing, have and been are auxiliary verbs, because play is the main verb. In the phrase I will have been playing, will, have and been are auxiliary verbs. Okay, they're not the main verb, which is playing. And passive, you know, I play, but the game was played. Was is an auxiliary verb to show you that the game was played. It was passively done. Okay, so auxiliary verbs are used for those 3 reasons. But there's also modal verbs, which are a subset of auxiliary verbs. Now, modal verbs are important. They're like can, could, would, should, shall, may, might. There might be a few others that I've forgotten there, but there are plenty of them. And they always deal with probability or obligation. And they're important because firstly, with a he and a she, normally you add an S on a verb in present simple. You say he plays, she plays, he goes, she goes, he does, she does. But you don't with modal verbs. You don't say he cans, you don't say she coulds, you don't say he wills or she woulds, because will is a modal verb, by the way. So modal verb means that you've only got one form of this verb. There's no infinitive, which means you can't say I want to can. You have to say I want to be able to. You can't say I want to must. There's no infinitive of these modal verbs. There are no participles. Participle just means the verb with ing on the end acting as an adjective. So if you say, let's think of a good participle, running home, he looked at his watch, yeah, meaning while he was running home, he looked at his watch. Running is a participle, but you can't say canning or wooding or willing or shalling. There are no participles with modal verbs. And there's no endings, I just mean no S endings there in present simple. You just basically don't change a modal verb. You've got to keep it the same, always. They have past forms, which is like can has the past form could. And so, I mean, but not all of them. Must doesn't really have a past form. If you're using it as an obligation, you need to say had to in the past. So there are a lot of complications with modal verbs. Okay, let's move past verbs, which are actions, onto modifiers. Adverbs. Now, adverbs, a lot of people agree now that adverbs are basically everything on the board. Anything's an adverb. Technically, it should be something which modifies a verb, but they don't just modify verbs. Let's take the expression drive fast. If you say he drives fast, that means that fast is modifying the verb drive. However, I mention fast straight away because fast is a tricky one. It's easy to get confused with fast because fast is an adverb and it's an adjective. So you can say he has a fast car. Fast is modifying car. It's an adjective. But you can say he drives fast. And then fast is modifying a verb. It's an adverb. So that's the first thing that adverbs can do. And that's perhaps what everybody knows they do. They modify verbs. But they also modify noun phrases. The word only is an adverb. And if you say I ate only fish and chips, it's modifying that noun phrase. So they can modify nouns as well, basically. They can modify adjectives as well when you say he was seriously injured in the crash. Yeah, any kind of, and by the way, adverbs, they're usually ly on the end. That's how people usually recognize them. But there are some tricky ones like friendly. Friendly looks like an adverb, but it's not. It's an adjective. He is a friendly guy. Friendly modifies guy. It doesn't modify a verb. Yeah, they usually have ly on the end, very often, but not always. So they can modify adjectives, they can modify other adverbs. If you say he sang very loudly, very is an adverb and it's modifying loudly. These kind of intensifiers are also adverbs, these words which make something less or more, slightly, very, what other ones are there? Forgotten them. Slightly, very, incredibly, unbelievably, they're all adverbs as well. And they can even modify a whole sentence or a whole clause. So we can say, surely he is right. And we're not modifying he, we're not modifying right, we're modifying the whole thing. Surely he is right. So adverbs can do pretty much everything. And they're quite difficult to deal with for that reason. Now, time and place, we use prepositions to show where something is or when it happened. And they're generally small words like in, of, at, under, without. All of these words are prepositions. I haven't got much to say about them because I can't really give you other categories with prepositions, but you can have prepositional phrases like on the table, in the garden, and very often they're added on the end of sentences or at the beginning in order to give you the time or the place. Sometimes they're separated from the rest of a sentence with a comma. It depends though. You don't have to with a short prepositional phrase like in 2000 or something like that, but you might want to stop confusion. So there's a few things to think about with prepositions. We also have conjunctions. Now, conjunctions join clauses. You can join you can join two independent clauses. An independent clause is a complete thought. A subordinate clause is an incomplete thought. So, for example, if I say, I went home, that's a complete thought. I can put a full stop on the end of that, and so that would be an independent clause. And I can join that independent clause with another independent clause with a coordinating conjunction, which I've written all of them up here: for, and, so, but, yet, nor, or. They're very often taught in schools as fanboys. These words join two independent clauses. So I went home, comma, and I watched TV. I watched TV is another independent clause. So we can join two independent clauses with one of these 7 conjunctions, fanboys. But we also have subordinate clauses, which is a dependent clause, not a main clause, not a complete thought, not independent. And subordinating conjunctions often begin a subordinate clause. So I haven't written all the subordinating conjunctions because there are many. But if I say something like, if it's sunny next weekend, it's an incomplete thought. I can't put a full stop there. If it's sunny next weekend, we will go to the park. So we will go to the park is an independent clause, and if you have the subordinate clause first, you always have subordinate clause, comma, main clause. But subordinating conjunctions, they begin a subordinate clause. Coordinating conjunctions begin an independent clause. So they are different. Okay, that's pretty much all I've got to say about conjunctions, but there are also, lastly, interjections, which just express emotion, or maybe not. In the case of oops, you might not be expressing emotion, but more like, oh, I've made a mistake. But they're just the sudden bursts. They're very often followed by an exclamation mark, and they're words like wow, ouch, hey, oops. They're just suddenly put into the middle of the conversation. Now, I hope that's all clear. If you have any questions about any of these, please write them under the video and I'll be delighted to answer them. I'll try to go into more detail about gradable adjectives and commas on another video, and I'll try to go more into detail about lots of these things, perhaps about adverbs as well, because they are rather confusing. And I think I missed a bit, didn't I? I missed non-finite verbs down here. Non-finite verbs sound complicated, but they're actually just infinitives, gerunds and participles. Participles are adjectives. Gerunds are nouns. But they're basically both the verb plus ing. Verb plus ing. So going, doing, playing, travelling. That could be a noun or it could be an adjective. And if it's a noun, it's a gerund. If it's an adjective, it's a participle. So it all depends on how you're using that verb plus ing. They really can be used in two different ways. So I could say something like smoking cigarettes is bad for you. But I could say, look at that smoking forest, it must be on fire. And then I mean the forest is smoking, there's smoke coming out of the forest. And so it could be an adjective or it could be a noun. And infinitives are just to do, to go, to play. They've always got to before the infinitive, well, not always, but many times in English, you've got to before the infinitive. And all of these three are non-finite verbs. What that means is you very often don't need a subject when you have a participle clause or a gerund clause or an infinitive clause. So you might say something like, To have lied is to have suffered. That's the first one that comes to mind. It's something that Victor Hugo said. And you've got to have lied. It's a perfect infinitive, in fact, is to have suffered. So you've got a 2 plus infinitive clause and a 2 plus infinitive clause on both sides of the linking verb. So these expressions are called non-finite verbs. Finite verbs are just ordinary verbs which take a subject, and they're maybe transitive, maybe intransitive, but they take a subject. Non-finite verbs don't need a subject. Smoking is bad for you. Smoking is the subject. There's no I smoking or we smoking. And so they're called non-finite verbs. Okay, I think that's everything. If you have any questions, as I just said, please put them under the video. And if you've liked this lesson, please give it a like, and I'll see you all soon.